normal visit to the bank turns into an infuriating ordeal when a customer is met with resistance at every turn. What should have been a routine withdrawal quickly spirals into a situation no one saw coming. As tension rises, an unsuspecting employee is about to make the biggest mistake of their career. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever been unfairly treated in a place where you should have been respected? The sharp click of Patricia Reeves' heels echoed across the glossy marble floor of the bank lobby. It was a sound that usually commanded attention, a sound that meant business. But today, no one looked twice. No nods of acknowledgement, no polite greetings. She had dressed deliberately down, swapping her usual tailored suit for a simple cashmere sweater and dark jeans, her hair swept into a casual ponytail. The air around her was sterile, the faint scent of printer ink and freshly sanitized countertops mixing in with the low hum of murmured conversations. She stood in line, unnoticed. For Patricia, this wasn't just any bank. This was her bank. She owned it. She built it. And yet, standing there, waiting, she was just another face in the crowd, a black woman in an upscale financial institution, about to experience what too many others had before her. A teller's voice broke through the quiet, calling the next customer. Patricia stepped forward, placing her sleek leather wallet onto the counter, her fingers grazing against the smooth surface. Across from her stood a young bank teller, Angela Lewis. She was polite, professional, though something in her expression shifted slightly as she took in Patricia's face, her clothes, her presence. It was subtle, but Patricia noticed. "Good afternoon. How can I help you today?" Angela's voice was warm, practiced. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Patricia said smoothly, sliding her ID across the counter along with a withdrawal slip she had already filled out. Angela took the ID and glanced at it. Patricia saw the momentary pause, the slight hesitation, the kind that meant calculations were happening behind the eyes, a flicker of skepticism. "All right, Ms. Reeves." The name came out slower than it should have, as if Angela was turning it over in her mind, trying to match it to the person standing in front of her. She checked the computer, her fingers gliding over the keys before her brows knit together in a faint frown. "One moment, please." Patricia nodded, watching as Angela rose from her seat and made her way toward the branch manager's office. From behind the glass, Robert Franklin sat at his desk, flipping through paperwork with the half-hearted interest of a man who had no real concerns. When Angela leaned in to whisper something to him, Patricia knew. She knew. She had seen it before, felt it before. Franklin's gaze snapped up, locking onto her through the glass as Angela handed over the ID. His lips pressed into a thin line, and in that moment, Patricia was no longer just another customer. She was a problem. Franklin stood, adjusted the cuffs of his expensive shirt, and strolled out of his office with the slow, deliberate gait of a man who believed himself untouchable. He was middle-aged, salt and pepper hair slicked back, his suit impeccable, the kind of man who didn't deal with issues personally unless he wanted to make a point. Patricia didn't flinch when he approached. "Ms. Reeves," he said, his tone carefully measured, "we just need to verify some information before proceeding with your withdrawal." She tilted her head slightly. "Is there an issue?" Franklin offered a practiced smile. "Just protocol, you understand." Protocol. A word often used as a shield for bias. "Of course," Patricia said, folding her arms as she watched him. "Take your time." Franklin nodded, signaling Angela to follow him back to the office. Minutes stretched. Patricia remained still, her heartbeat steady, her patience thinning. The murmuring from the office was hushed but not soundproof. A few words drifted out. Large withdrawal, security risk. She exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to laugh. Security risk? Her ID was valid. Her account balance could have bought the entire branch 3 times over, and yet the scrutiny remained. A few customers stole glances in her direction, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The energy had changed. When Franklin finally returned, Angela trailed behind him, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, Miss Reeves, but we can't process this withdrawal at this time." A beat of silence. Patricia's lips parted slightly, not in shock, but in something closer to amusement. "Chance?" she echoed, arching a brow. Franklin straightened. "We require additional verification for large transactions. If you'd like, you can return with further documentation." She let the words settle, rolling them over in her mind, tasting the familiar bitterness of them. "I see," she said. "And what kind of additional documentation would that be?" Franklin hesitated. "Proof of income, additional identification, perhaps a utility bill with your address." A small smile tugged at Patricia's lips. "And is that the standard for all customers?" Franklin didn't blink. "We follow the same procedures for everyone." A bold-faced lie. Patricia had stood in that line and watched at least 3 other customers withdraw large sums. No excessive questioning, no extra verification. But she had expected this. She had come here for this. And now it was time. Patricia let the silence stretch, watching Franklin shift slightly, discomfort creeping in at the edges of his carefully composed expression. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "Tell me, Mr. Franklin," she said, her voice silk smooth but edged with steel. "Would you like to repeat that for my legal team?" The color drained from his face. And that was just the beginning. A hush fell over the bank lobby. Conversations dimmed. The tension in the air sharpened like the point of a blade. Patricia Reeves remained exactly where she stood, poised, unwavering. Her phone, still in her hand, felt cool against her fingertips. She hadn't pressed record, not yet, but the threat alone was enough to send a ripple of discomfort through Robert Franklin's otherwise composed expression. "I beg your pardon." His voice had lost some of its practiced confidence, the edge of control slipping from his grip, like sand through fingers. Patricia's eyes never left his. "Would you like to repeat what you just said? On record, of course, just so I can ensure my legal team understands your policy correctly?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Franklin's face. It was quick, but Patricia caught it. Angela, the teller, took a small step back, sensing the impending storm. A few customers had slowed in their transactions, pretending not to listen, but their curiosity was palpable. The security guard by the entrance shifted his stance, his hand grazing his radio. Patricia's patience had officially worn thin. She reached out and retrieved her ID from the counter, flipping it open and placing it flat against the surface for Franklin to see. "Let's try this again," she said, her voice silk-wrapped steel. "My name is Patricia Reeves, CEO and majority owner of Reeves Trust, the bank you currently work for." Angela inhaled sharply. A beat passed, then another. Franklin blinked. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. For the first time, the calculation behind his eyes wasn't about doubting her identity. It was about salvaging himself. "Ms. Reeves, I wasn't aware." Franklin stumbled over his words, his tone suddenly softer, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "If I had known—" "You would have done your job properly," Patricia interrupted. "Is that what you're saying?" He opened his mouth, then shut it. Patricia took a step forward, lowering her voice just enough to make it clear that every single word mattered. "Because let me be very clear, Mr. Franklin," she said, enunciating each syllable like it was a lesson he would never forget. "You didn't question my withdrawal because of bank policy. You questioned it because you took one look at me and you assumed I didn't belong." The weight of the truth settled over them like a storm cloud. The tension in Franklin's shoulders betrayed him. He was trying to maintain composure, but the cracks were forming, and Patricia saw them all. "Miss Reeves, This was all just a misunderstanding." He tried again, his voice wavering. "I was simply following standard—" "You and I both know that's a lie," Patricia cut in smoothly, tilting her head. "So, let's talk about what actually happened here today." Her gaze swept across the room, ensuring that every pair of eyes on them knew exactly what was unfolding. "You saw a black woman attempting to withdraw money," she continued, her voice calm, even. "You decided that she must be suspicious. You ignored the fact that she provided valid identification, that she followed every procedure. Instead, you imposed unnecessary obstacles to delay her transaction. You called for additional verification that you didn't require from the previous 3 customers in line before me." Angela's gaze darted to Franklin, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to object, but she didn't, because she knew. They all knew. "And now," Patricia went on, her voice laced with quiet authority, "you're realizing that the black woman you attempted to humiliate just so happens to own the very institution you work for." Franklin paled, the muscles in his jaw clenched as he tried to salvage what little dignity he had left. "I assure you, Ms. Reeves," he said, his words careful, strained, "there was no ill intent here." Patricia's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No ill intent?" she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Tell me, Mr. Franklin, how many other customers today have been asked for additional proof of income just to withdraw their own money?" Silence. How many others were made to feel like criminals for requesting access to their own accounts? Still silence. Franklin shifted his weight from one foot to the other, but he said nothing. Patricia exhaled, shaking her head as if disappointed but not surprised. "I built this bank to be a place of trust," she said, her voice carrying across the lobby, ensuring that everyone heard her. "A place where all customers, regardless of race, gender, or background, are treated with the same level of respect." She turned her gaze back to Franklin, pinning him in place. "And you have failed to uphold that mission." His lips parted slightly, but no words came. "Now," Patricia continued, "you have 2 choices. You can process my withdrawal, as you should have done the moment I handed you my ID, or," she tilted her head slightly, "you can clear out your desk." Angela inhaled sharply. A murmur rippled through the bank. Franklin's breathing had become shallow. His hands twitched at his sides. Patricia didn't blink, didn't waver. "I'll process the withdrawal immediately," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to thank him. She merely nodded once and watched as Franklin turned away, retreating to his office with stiff, robotic steps. Angela cleared her throat and stepped forward hesitantly. "Ms. Reeves," she said cautiously. Patricia held up a hand, stopping her. "I know," she said. Because she did. Angela had been uncomfortable, had hesitated, but she had also followed Franklin's orders, and that was its own problem. She'd deal with that later. Right now, she had other priorities. Within minutes, her transaction was completed, without any additional verification. Patricia slid the cash into her purse, snapped it shut, and turned toward the exit. But before she left, she made sure to pause, just long enough to lock eyes with Franklin, who stood stiffly behind his desk, watching her with something between shame and fear. She smiled. "Enjoy the rest of your day, Mr. Franklin." And then she walked out, knowing full well that this would be far from over. Patricia Reeves didn't rush as she stepped out of the bank. She walked with the same slow, deliberate stride she always had, the kind that let people know she was in full control. The afternoon sun cast long shadows against the sidewalk, but inside her there was no darkness. There was only purpose. She reached into her bag, retrieving her phone. One call, that was all it would take. The moment the call connected, a crisp voice answered. "Ms. Reeves." "Jonathan," Patricia said, her tone smooth, calm, but unmistakably sharp. "We have a problem." A pause. Then, "Where?" "Downtown branch," she said. "Meet me at headquarters, 15 minutes. No questions, no hesitation. "Understood," Jonathan Pierce, chairman of the board, responded. Patricia ended the call and slid her phone back into her bag. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she approached her car, a sleek black sedan parked along the curb. She didn't look back at the bank. Franklin's panic, his shame, that was already done. This was the beginning. Inside the downtown branch, the tension remained. Franklin stood behind the counter, his hands pressed against the polished wood as if grounding himself. His mind raced. What now? What next? He had miscalculated, badly. Angela hovered behind her workstation, eyes darting between him and the other employees who were whispering amongst themselves. The energy had shifted. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on all of them. "Sir," Angela finally spoke, hesitant. Franklin exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "Not now, Angela." "But I said not now." His voice came out harsher than he intended, and Angela took a step back. Franklin clenched his jaw. This wasn't good, not good at all. His hands balled into fists as he turned back toward his office, shutting the door behind him with a firm thud. At Reeves Trust headquarters, Patricia walked through the gleaming glass doors without missing a beat. The receptionist barely had time to greet her before she strode toward the boardroom. Jonathan Pierce was already waiting, his silver hair neatly combed back, his suit pristine as always. "You're early," he noted, closing the folder he had been reviewing. "I don't have time for small talk," Patricia said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Franklin." Jonathan sighed, rubbing his temple. "What did he do?" Patricia leaned forward, clasping her hands together on the polished table. "He did exactly what we've been trying to root out," she said. "He denied a withdrawal to a customer based on nothing but bias. No policy, no actual justification." Jonathan exhaled sharply. "You were the customer, weren't you?" She tilted her head slightly. "Does it make a difference?" A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "It does to him." "Good," Patricia said. Jonathan folded his hands in front of him. "You want him gone?" "Of course I do," she said without hesitation. "But not just gone. I want everyone in that branch to understand exactly why." Jonathan tapped his fingers against the table, considering her words. "If we fire him outright, he'll claim wrongful termination. Even if we have just cause, he might make noise." Patricia arched an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting we don't fire him?" Jonathan chuckled under his breath. "No, I'm suggesting we make it impossible for him to argue." Patricia sat back, crossing one leg over the other. "What do you propose?" "We conduct a branch-wide review," Jonathan said, his voice thoughtful. "Bring in an external auditor. We make it clear that we are investigating reports of biased practices. Franklin will fold under pressure. He'll either step down voluntarily or we'll have documented proof to dismiss him without issue." A slow smile spread across Patricia's lips. "I like the way you think, Jonathan." His smirk deepened. "I did learn from the best." Patricia reached for her phone. "Then let's get started." By the time Franklin's office phone rang, his nerves were already frayed. The tension hadn't left his body since Patricia Reeves walked out of the bank. He snatched up the receiver. "Franklin speaking." "Robert," came the clipped voice of Jonathan Pierce. "You need to be at headquarters in an hour." Franklin swallowed. "What is this about?" A pause. "An internal review," Jonathan said. "We have concerns about certain practices at your branch." Cold sweat prickled at the back of Franklin's neck. "Concerns," he echoed, his voice tight. "This is about Ms. Reeves, isn't it?" "An hour, Robert," Jonathan said simply. Then the line went dead. Franklin set the receiver down, staring at it like it had personally betrayed him. He was screwed. When Franklin arrived at Reeves Trust headquarters, the air in the boardroom was thick with unspoken words. Patricia sat at the head of the table, Jonathan to her right. A legal representative sat beside them and across from them. Him. He sank into the chair, his hands damp with sweat. Patricia was the first to speak. "Do you know why you're here, Robert?" Franklin shifted. "Look, Yes or no?" Patricia interrupted smoothly. His throat bobbed. "Yes." "Good," she said. She leaned forward, hands folded neatly. "Then let's get straight to the point," she continued. "We are launching a full review of the policies and practices at your branch." Franklin swallowed. "Mr. Reeves, Ms. Reeves, nothing." Her voice was sharp now, no longer teasing the edges of patience. "You embarrass this company today. You embarrass me, and more importantly, you proved that you are incapable of leading with integrity." Franklin's mouth went dry. "You will be on immediate leave, effective now while the investigation is conducted," Patricia continued. "We have already assigned an independent team to review transaction patterns, customer complaints, and employee conduct under your management." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, watching Franklin carefully. "If there is even a hint of misconduct, you will not only be terminated, but we will ensure that it follows you to every banking institution you ever attempt to work for again." Franklin's heart pounded. "If you want to avoid that outcome," Patricia said, tilting her head, "I suggest you resign." Silence. Franklin felt like the walls were closing in. His mind raced, searching for an escape, any escape. "Resigned," Patricia repeated, slower this time. "Or roll the dice." "Your choice." His pride screamed at him to fight, to argue, but deep down he knew they had already won. His hands trembled as he inhaled sharply. "Resigned," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Patricia exhaled, standing up. "Smart decision." Jonathan nodded. "You'll receive severance, but you will never work in a leadership position in this industry again." Franklin didn't argue. He didn't dare. As he stood and turned toward the door, Patricia spoke one last time. "Oh, and Robert?" He paused, still. "Enjoy your early retirement." And just like that, he was gone. The moment Robert Franklin walked out of the boardroom, the air in the room shifted. It was like a pressure had been released, a weight lifted. Patricia watched the door close behind him, exhaling slowly. He had taken the resignation papers with shaking hands, barely able to hold the pen as he scrawled his signature. It was done. She glanced at Jonathan, who gave her a knowing nod. "That was satisfying," he murmured, leaning back in his chair. "Necessary," Patricia corrected, "and long overdue." He chuckled. "True, but I have to admit, watching him squirm was a personal highlight." Patricia didn't disagree. Franklin had been a problem waiting to be exposed, and today he had done it to himself. There was no need for theatrics, just consequences. She pushed back her chair and stood, straightening her blazer. "Let's not waste any time. There's work to do." Jonathan followed her lead. "Where are we starting?" She was already heading toward the exit, the branch. When Patricia stepped back into the downtown location of Reeves Trust, it felt different. Maybe it was because she felt different. She wasn't just another face in line now. Everyone in the building knew exactly who she was. Angela looked up from her station, her eyes widening before she quickly lowered her gaze. A few other employees whispered among themselves. The energy in the room was cautious, uncertain. Patricia walked with measured steps toward the center of the lobby. She could feel the eyes on her, the tension that hadn't yet settled. Good. Let them pay attention. She turned to the nearest teller. Not Angela, but a young man who had watched everything unfold earlier. "Is the conference room open?" Yes, ma'am," he stammered. "Good. I want every employee in there in 5 minutes," she said simply. He nodded quickly, scurrying off to relay the message. Patricia took a slow breath and turned, catching Angela's gaze again. "You too." Angela hesitated for half a second before giving a small nod and stepping away from her counter. 5 minutes later, the entire staff of the downtown branch sat around the polished wood conference table, waiting in tense silence. Some of them looked nervous, others confused, a few Angela included, looked guilty. Patricia didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, scanning the faces in front of her. "Let's be clear about why we're here," she began. "This isn't a conversation about Robert Franklin. He's gone, and he's not coming back." Some of the employees shifted in their seats. "This is a conversation about all of you," Patricia continued, "and the culture that was allowed to exist in this branch." A few of them stole glances at each other, but no one spoke. "I walked into this bank as a customer today," Patricia said, "and what I saw was unacceptable. I was denied service because of the way I looked, not because of policy, not because of any real issue with my account, but because bias exists here." The silence in the room was deafening. Angela's hands were clenched in her lap, her knuckles white. Patricia's voice remained steady. "That ends now." She stepped forward, letting the weight of her words sink in. "This bank was built on the principle of trust. It's in the name. It's what we're supposed to represent," she said. "If a customer walks into our institution, they should be treated with dignity, not suspicion, with respect, not hostility. Do I make myself clear?" A few hesitant nods. Patricia let her gaze settle on Angela. "You hesitated today," she said simply. "You saw what was happening, and you hesitated." Angela's head snapped up, shame flickering in her eyes. I didn't—" "I'm not here to fire you, Angela," Patricia said before she could finish. "I'm here to challenge you, to challenge all of you." She let her gaze sweep across the table. "Ask yourself, if I hadn't been the CEO, would you have spoken up? Would you have stopped Franklin, or would you have let it happen because it was easier?" No one answered, and that was answer enough. Patricia folded her arms. "Change is coming. Effective immediately, every single employee in this branch will undergo bias training. Not just the basics, but real training, one that will make you uncomfortable, one that will force you to think about the choices you make every day, the way you speak to people." A murmur rippled through the room, but no one dared argue. "If you don't want to be part of that change," Patricia said, "now is the time to leave." Silence. She nodded. "Good. Then let's move forward." Patricia turned to Jonathan, who had been standing quietly by the door the entire time. He stepped forward and set a folder down on the table. "In addition to bias training," Jonathan added, "we're implementing a new accountability system. Every customer complaint will be logged and reviewed, not just for financial discrepancies, but for behavioral concerns. If a pattern emerges, action will be taken." Patricia let his words settle before speaking again. "This isn't just about policies," she said. "This is about people. If you cannot treat every person who walks through these doors with the same respect you'd give to a wealthy white businessman in a suit, then you have no place here." The weight of her words filled the room. Angela exhaled, her posture finally shifting. "Ms. Reeves," she said quietly. Patricia met her gaze. "I should have spoken up," Angela admitted. "I should have done more. I won't make that mistake again." Patricia nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "I hope not," she said, "because I'll be watching." Angela swallowed, but nodded. "Understood." Patricia turned back to the rest of the room. "This is your chance," she said. "Your chance to be part of a better bank, a better culture, a better standard. I built this bank to create opportunity, not to let people be pushed out because of ignorance or bias." A pause, then she added, "If you want to be part of that future, prove it." And with that she turned and walked out of the room. 2 weeks later, the changes were already in motion. The bias training had begun and the response had been mixed, but that was expected. Growth was uncomfortable. Change wasn't easy, but it was happening. Jonathan sent Patricia a report that morning. Customer satisfaction at the downtown branch had already improved. Complaints had dropped. Employees were more engaged, more aware. And most importantly, the culture was shifting. Patricia sat in her office, staring at the report, before closing the folder with a quiet sigh of satisfaction. A soft knock came at the door. Angela stepped in hesitantly. "Miss Reeves?" Patricia gestured for her to enter. Angela walked up to the desk, clearing her throat. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for holding us accountable, for giving me the chance to be better." Patricia studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Just make sure you use it," she said simply. Angela nodded, then turned to leave. Before she stepped out, Patricia called after her. "Oh, and Angela?" Angela paused, glancing back. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. "You're off to a good start." Angela smiled back, then left the office. Patricia exhaled, leaning back in her chair. This was only the beginning.